How'd the left get so crazy? What happened to them? There's a new book out, Progressively Worse, Why Today's Democrats Ain't Your Daddy's Donkeys. The author of that book is Fox News contributor, media and politics columnist Joe Concha, and he joins us here on the phone. Joe, good to have you with us, sir, and congratulations on the new book.
Thank you, Vinny. Appreciate it. It's a labor of love.
How many of these books are you going to write? Aren't you done with books yet? You got all these books.
No.
That's a lot of work.
Let's see, I had one 2022 that was Come On Man, the truth about Joe Biden's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad presidency, and then that did really well. So I'm like, okay, now I'll do Progressively Worse, Why Today's Democrats Ain't Your Daddy's Donkeys. And basically what we do is we look at the records of JFK, for example, or even President Carter, President Clinton, President Obama, and then we compare it to whatever this version is of the Democratic Party we see today. And it is horrifying because this was a party that used to do some common sense things, right? I mean, you had John F. Kennedy. He cut taxes when he inherited a recession in 1961. We had GDP growth that went to nearly 7% as a result, and obviously he was for a strong military. He was against racial quotas. If JFK were running today, he would be painted as an extreme MAGA Republican.
Yeah.
Then you look at Jimmy Carter, right? He was a pro-life Democratic president. That is practically extinct now as far as the Democratic Party. I think there's one pro-life member of Congress left, and that's it. So, yeah, I guess that whole thought process is gone. So much for diversity. And then Bill Clinton, though, I mean, his record, you take away Monica's. People think of Lewinsky first. But this guy was so smart. In 1994, he takes a drubbing in midterms, and obviously we had a GOP House contract with America, and he could have done two things. He could have done what Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and Democrats do now, which is to run to Twitter and just play snark tweeting at Republicans all day and not even attempt to work with them. Or, maybe I'll win re-election by going to the center and doing things that people like and is popular. Like, for example, balanced budget amendment. We actually had budget surpluses at the end of the 90s as a result of that. Or ending the welfare state, or slate. What am I trying to say here? State, thank you. Or, I mean, the fact that he declared, Bill Clinton did, the era of big government is over, and he actually shrank the government, and these things were very popular. And he won 1996 so easily, and even Barack Obama was labeled the deporter-in-chief because he deported so many people through his very capable DHS Secretary, Jay Johnson. So you look at these four presidents, or even Tip O'Neill for that matter, working out things with Ronald Reagan over a drink after work because they were civilized people who thought about the good of the country.
Yeah.
Now, Kamala Harris, Vince, as you've been talking about on your show, when you want to ban fracking, you want to end the fossil fuel industry, you want to abolish ICE, you support sanctuary cities, you want to give free health care to illegals, you want to end private insurance, you believe in late-term abortion, you believe that biological men should compete against biological women, and we saw what happened at the Olympics, which was just horrifying. I could go down the list, but these ain't your daddy's donkeys anymore. Dude.
No, they're not. And so I kind of feel like Obama is the Trojan horse in the center of all of this, because Obama comes into office on this promise that we're not a black America, we're not a white America, we're not a liberal, we're not a conservative America, we're the United States of America. He gives these big speeches about how we need to be unified as a country. He comes in with the majority opinion on the subject of marriage. When he came into office, he held that it was between a man and a woman. He basically occupied this space where he would talk about the issues of the country in a way that were broadly accessible to the majority of the country. But things seem like they really accelerated in a very radical direction during his 8 years in office.
Exactly, and progressively worse. That I see that as the turning point around 2008, 2009 in terms of the way the media went about their business. I mean, in 2005, 50%. Half the country still trusted the media. It's down to about 31% now, and obviously among Republicans, it's in the single digits for very good reason.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think social media began to emerge then, and then you saw Democrats, you see it today with AOC and Eric Swalwell, Adam Schiff. They all exist not to pass legislation, again, for the good of the country or to compromise with the other side. They're all about likes, retweets, and getting on Stephen Colbert. And so I think social media really emerged during that time. I think MSNBC, I give them a full chapter in the book, they used to have Tucker Carlson on its air as a primetime host. They had Jesse Ventura as a host. Who else did they have? Somebody crazy.
Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck was a CNN headline news host, I believe, at the time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Laura Ingraham was on there. I mean, you could go down the list. They weren't a conservative network. They weren't a liberal network. They actually tried to speak to all voices and give different voices different opinions. And then Oprahman and Maddow took over, and then that was the end. And then they never went back. And then we saw that evidence just a couple of months ago where they hire Ronna McDaniel, and she doesn't even last 48 hours because the inmates say, we can't have a Trump supporter on here. That's nuts. So I think media went left, social media emerged, and that's why the Democratic Party has been pushed in this direction.
You said something that made me think about, kind of where they are now, which is that they don't even bother themselves with attempting to pass legislation. And part of this is that the left has this view that the government needs to operate without the interference of the voters, that the various agencies can do whatever they want, that the White House isn't allowed to impose its will on those agencies unless, of course, it's to achieve some sort of left-wing goal. Today, we find out that the Department of Defense or something apparently negotiated the plea deal with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and the White House wasn't even aware of it. How is that even possible? Is the executive branch, the White House should be aware of this. And one of the critiques I hear from the left, to the extent that they've looked at the contents of Heritage's Project 2025, they're like, oh, this is so radical that they would expect the president to be in charge of the agencies. I'm sorry. That's literally the first sentence of Article 2 of the Constitution. So to what extent have they decided to hell with governance, to hell with legislation? We'll just let the agencies make it up.
Wow. I mean, I'm asking Alexa right now. Alexa, what is a commander-in-chief? Because to your point, that's literally what the job description is. And instead, they're outsourcing this DOD. They didn't even know about it. Of course they didn't know about it. When was the last time you saw Joe Biden live on camera? It's a serious question. Do I have to ask the proof of life question again? I mean, somebody's running his Twitter account. He puts out some statements here and there. He shouldn't be president right now. He should have stepped down. How could you run the country for 4 more years and say, oh, no, actually, I don't think I'm ready to do that, but you could still run the country for another 6 months? And everybody just forgot that he left the stage without even explaining really what. Hasn't taken one question. No, actually, two people haven't taken one question. Joe Biden, since he said he wasn't running again, and Kamala Harris, since she became the Democratic nominee. Not one question, and the press doesn't care.
No.
They should be demanding press conferences of this woman. But to your point, though, on abortion, that was sent back to the states. Now people are voting on that, whether they want it in their states or not. That's a good thing, but Democrats don't want that. They want central control over that. Same thing with student loans. You had the Congress is supposed to pass whatever involves purse strings and money and so on, and it goes through the Senate, and eventually the president signs off on it. They said, screw you, U.S. Congress, and oh yeah, Supreme Court, screw you too, who said this was illegal. We're going to do it anyway. So if I got to hear one more time about this is the party that's going to save democracy, when their nominee ran for president in 2020, didn't get one vote, and now is the nominee in 2024 and hasn't gotten one vote. I mean, enough with that argument. And if we had a somewhat honest media, they'd be calling it out on this, but nope, it's all pom-poms and cheerleading for Kamala Harris.
Joe, I just came up with a theory as you were talking about Joe and his being non-compos mentis and what that means for us. You know what I think it probably happened? I bet you they changed the procedure for how to do a nuclear launch. I bet you that story's going. I bet you that story will come out at some point after his presidency. Yeah, they had to change the way they handle that. The guy with the football, I'd like to see how closely he follows, whomever. Is he really following Joe Biden that closely? They probably changed the procedure, if I had to guess.
Wow, so it would go to Lloyd Austin or somebody?
Yeah, somebody else. Or this is entirely reckless, and the guy who can't be prosecuted because his brain doesn't work is still allowed to fire the nukes. Maybe that's what's happening. It's so crazy. Let's talk about Kamala Harris now. So the left is handing this all off to Kamala. As we speak today, Democrats are voting in secret to make her the nominee. As of this morning, the delegates for the Democrat National Convention have begun voting online. You and I are not welcome at this vote. They're doing this behind closed doors. The vote is set to conclude on Monday night at 6 p.m. So by Monday at 6, Kamala will be made the nominee officially, and they haven't even had their convention yet. What do you see going on here, Joe?
Their conventions starts on Monday, August 19th. So, yeah, so 2 weeks before then, they're going to vote secretly online? Is everybody that afraid to go to Chicago because it's going to look like Gaza for a week? As far as you'll never see more Palestinian and Hamas flags flying out there. So yeah. I couldn't tell you what's going on here, Vince, except, again, this is Soviet kind of stuff. And I never spoke in these terms before. You know me, I'm not a hyperbolic guy, but this should scare everybody. And I would hope eventually – I think this is how this is going to play out. It's going to come down to the Harris-Trump debate if it happens. You could already see the groundwork being made that, well, Trump agreed to the September 10th ABC News debate against Biden, except Biden's not there anymore. So since it's a new candidate, logic says that it resets, you renegotiate the terms, and you pick a different date because now it's a different candidate that you're preparing against. And of course, you're not doing that. So if she somehow can find a way out of the debate, and I'm sure they would love that, but let's say they do debate. 90 million people are going to tune in, maybe more. And how she performs will decide this election. And she's just like Biden, except she can't blame dementia. There's something broken in that brain where she has to speak extemporaneously and actually has to make an argument on her own, and it doesn't go well. And especially when you think about the record that I just brought up, and
yes,
at least a dozen other things I didn't bring up, I don't see how she defends these things, quite frankly. And I think that's where the race is won. I think Trump wins because of two debates, one against Biden, one against Harris.
Yeah, I think you're right. The key is getting her off script. You know, I've been intrigued by the movement in the polls to the extent that they are valuable over the past few weeks. And they're moving in Kamala's direction, which the left is all very excited about. And that indicated to me that actually the cover-up of Kamala's brain has been far more successful than the cover-up of Biden's brain, hasn't it?
It totally has. Even though I saw a segment it was just being replayed on social media. CNN just maybe 2 months ago actually had a panel discussion on how maybe Joe Biden has to replace Kamala Harris on the ticket because she's dragging down the ticket. And now it's like, yeah, she's the best. So, yeah, I mean, there is something broken about that. I mean, you just go back and read and think about some of the things that she has said. I'm sorry. As long as we get decent moderators for this, if it is Fox, Brett Baier, Martha McCallum, for instance, that would be nice. And they ask really germane questions. And Trump preps, by the way. I know he doesn't like the prep because he wants to come across as authentic and not rehearsed, but he has to have these things ready, you know. And at the NABJ yesterday, when he was asked, is Kamala a diversity hire, basically, all he had to say was, do I think that she was chosen because of her race and because of her gender? Yes. And I know this because Joe Biden said that was the reason why she was being chosen, because he said he would have only a female black president, and that's that.
Yeah, so I agree with you completely. In fact, I thought that would have been a great point for Trump to bring up. Although I will say that the hysterical reaction to Trump's remarks yesterday is like, it's so funny. It's like, how many times have we seen this news cycle play out? He bicycle kicks the hornet's nest. The media overstates what he said in an effort to try and take him down. And all it does is force Americans to give it a little bit more scrutiny and then to realize that, hey, Trump has a point. And the point that Trump was conveying is that Kamala Harris is a weather vane. She is a phony. She's an opportunist. And Trump said that in so many words yesterday. And if he had just stood on a stage, Joe Concha, and said, Kamala Harris is a phony, the media wouldn't cover it. But if he gets up there and goes, man, who is this lady? She's constantly representing herself in completely different ways to completely different audiences. They're freaking out at him. And I think it's a good thing. I think, once again, he's got their number.
Yeah, I mean, did you see Kamala Harris in Atlanta where she had that fake accent that was like a bad imitation of the Hillary Clinton fake accent of a Southern accent? I mean, it was so cringeworthy to watch. And you're right, weather vane is perfect. And the big takeaway from that event yesterday, by the way, was the fact that Donald Trump was there. He was actually on stage, and Kamala Harris couldn't show up because, oh, my God, there's Harris Faulkner, and if she had to face questions from her, not so much Rachel Scott, then it would have gone sideways. So now I guess she's doing it by Zoom. How's that going to work? Is Harris Faulkner allowed to ask questions on the Zoom call? And will she have a teleprompter that she's reading on Zoom? And will she get the questions advanced from ABC? Because, well, why wouldn't they do that, right? So, yeah, it's so phony. You're exactly right. That's exactly the word, phony.
And once again, Harris Faulkner's microphone won't be working when Kamala Harris is on the Zoom call. Hey, thank you very much, Joe Concha. Always good to talk to you. Congratulations on the new book, Progressively Worse.